A good word to describe Earl Boykins' game would probably be crafty, but when you're 5'5" in a league full of giants, you have no choice but to be crafty. He relied on his great footwork as he was a master with his pivot foot, yet also utilized well-timed pump fakes and his overall speed and quickness to help him slash and score, often zooming past defenders before they could even react and then throwing up his trademark rainbow arc floater. He can be mentioned in the same breath as the other great little men of all time, like Muggsy Bogues and Spud Webb. But Boykins was a scorer through and through. He had a stellar career at Eastern Michigan, ending as one of the best scorers in the entire nation. Then even though it took some years to find his place in the NBA, he never gave up, and it paid off, as he spent some years in the 2000s as one of the league's top 6 men. Then although his production dipped after leaving Denver, he had still showed enough value to play for nearly a decade and a half in the league. No, he's not one of the greatest scorers you'll ever see, and he wasn't one of the most efficient. But in his prime, you knew he could go off for 20 to 25 points on any night. And that's rare. But when you can do that at 5'5" and 135 pounds, that's unheard of. Let's jog your memory. A Cleveland native, Earl Boykins attended Central Catholic High School, where as a senior he averaged 24.6 points while leading the Ironmen to a 23-3 record. But according to his height listing, Boykins was much taller than he actually was, as during high school, the 5'5" Boykins would reveal that he would tell anyone who asked that he was 5'8" to help his recruiting chances. And regardless of his height, he was an incredible offensive talent, but the height wouldn't get him many looks from big programs. However, Eastern Michigan would not only offer him a scholarship, they would offer him a starting spot as a freshman. So this was a no-brainer for Boykins. Going into '95, the Eagles had a solid team, but Boykins quickly established himself as one of the best players they had, as years of playing with grown men in pickup games back in Cleveland had more than prepared him for the more physical play that comes with college basketball. Boykins was a day one starter, averaging over 32 minutes per game and finishing tied for second on the team in scoring and first in assists. And the Eagles had a good season, which included a December 10th upset win over Wisconsin, as overall they would go 18-8 in the regular season, and even put together a 7-game win streak in February. They would have a good showing in the MAC tournament, defeating Toledo, then Ohio, before losing to Ball State in the final. But the 20-9 Eagles wouldn't get an NCAA tournament berth, yet they would receive an invite to the NIT, but they would come up just short in the first round against Bradley, as they would lose by 1 point in double overtime, with Boykins' freshman year seeing him average about 12.5 points, 4.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. 1996 would see Eastern Michigan get an incredible season from senior guard Brian Tolbert, and fellow sophomore Derek Dial would also play well, as guard play was the strength of the Eagles, with Boykins also making noticeable improvements, as he upped his scoring by 3 points and averaged an assist more per game, as he would again lead the team in assists while finishing second in scoring, and would even be named second team all-conference. The Eagles were a fast-paced offensive team, as their 83.7 points per game was the 12th highest average in the nation, and they would translate that into a lot of winning. They would begin the regular season 7-0, then after a close loss to UTEP, they would rattle off 8 more wins, as at this point they were 15-2, but they would cool down to end the year, going just 6-3 to finish the regular season at 21-5. But they would finish 14-4 in conference play to win the MAC regular season championship. Then in the MAC tourney, they would dominate, beating Kent State by 12, then Ball State by 16, before defeating Toledo by 14 to win the MAC tournament championship and secure a bid to the NCAA tournament, where Boykins would put himself on the map. The 9th-seeded Eagles would take on the 8th-seeded Duke Blue Devils in round 1, and while these weren't the same Blue Devils from a few years earlier, who had won back-to-back titles, they were still the Blue Devils, and were expected to win. But after an even first half, Eastern Michigan would pull away in the second, outscoring Duke by 15 to win the game, as the 5'5" Boykins had put up a game-high 23 points on over 53% shooting, along with 5 assists and 4 steals, setting up a date with top-seeded UConn in round 2. But the Huskies were too much, as Boykins would only manage 10 points on 5 of 15 shooting in a loss, as his sophomore season had seen him average about 15.5 points, 6 assists, and 2 steals per game. Going into '97, Eastern Michigan and Earl Boykins were now much more well-known, but Tolbert had graduated, so they would need bigger contributions from guys like Boykins, and he would deliver. The junior guard would lead the team in scoring, assists, and steals, as he would even finish as a top 3 scorer in the conference, and would be named first team all-conference. The Eagles kept their high-octane offense, but they weren't as effective as last year, averaging nearly 3 less points on offense and allowing over 2 more points on defense. Yet they would still start the season 12-1 and were 18-4 near the end of the year, but they would then lose 5 straight and overall would finish the regular season at 20-9. They would again make it to the MAC tournament final, but this time Miami of Ohio would defeat them in a blowout, and the Eagles would not receive a tournament bid after this, as Boykins' season ended with him averaging about 19 points, 4.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. Additionally, over the summer, Boykins would be a member of Team USA in the '97 World University Games, after not making the team last year due to his size. Yet he would show this year that they made a mistake, as he led the team in scoring, assists, and 3-point percentage, while helping them to a gold medal finish. The '98 Eagles were led by their backcourt duo of Boykins and Dial, and for the second straight year, Boykins would lead the team in scoring, assists, and steals, as he would also lead the conference in scoring. But even more impressive was that his 25.7 points per game was the second highest mark in the entire nation, as Boykins was named first team all-conference and would win the Francis Pomeroy Naismith Award as the nation's best player under 6 feet. The Eagles wouldn't have a great year as they finished the regular season at just 17-9, but they had pulled off a big upset against Michigan on December 10th at Chrysler Arena, when they won by 6 in overtime. They would put it together in the conference tourney, as they would defeat Toledo, then Ball State, and in the final they would get revenge on Miami of Ohio with their own blowout win to secure the MAC tournament title and a bid to the NCAA tournament. But it would be a short run, as they were defeated in the first round by Michigan State, as although Boykins finished with 18 points, he shot just 6 of 21 from the field. But his great senior year had ended with him averaging about 25.5 points, 5.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. Boykins was thought by some analysts to be an early second or even late first round pick in the '98 draft. Unfortunately, whether you're the second leading scorer in the nation or not, when you're below 5.5 feet tall, not a lot of NBA teams are going to be willing to take a chance on you, and especially won't want to spend a draft pick on you. So Boykins went undrafted and would soon sign with the Rockford Lightning of the Continental Basketball Association. Boykins would leave the CBA in January to attend the New Jersey Nets camp prior to the lockout-shortened season, and he would gain the respect of his peers and his coaches. He would make the team, but he wouldn't last long, as he would see action in 5 games before being released. Yet Cleveland general manager Wayne Embry had also been high on Boykins, and even considered drafting him, yet decided against it due to them already featuring undersized guard Brevin Knight. So in late March, Boykins would get a couple 10-day contracts with the Cavs before being signed for the remainder of the year in April, and appearing in 17 games for a 22-28 Cavs team, as his overall rookie season had seen him average about 3 points, 1 rebound, and 1.5 assists per game. Cleveland would release Boykins after the season, and he would sign with Orlando in mid-November, then would appear in 1 game before being waived about a month later. And then in early February, he was back in Cleveland on a 10-day deal, before being signed for the rest of the season in late February, as he would appear in 25 games for a 32-50 Cavs team, with his overall regular season seeing him average about 5.5 points, 1 rebound, and 2 assists per game. Once again, the Cavs didn't re-sign Boykins after the year, but he would sign a deal with the Clippers prior to the 01 season. His opportunity would be limited, as he would appear in just 10 games due to injury. But in those 10 games, he had some periods where he got substantial minutes, and he would even hit double figures in 3 of those games, for a Clippers team who finished at 31-51, as his 01 season had seen him average about 6.5 points, 1 rebound, and 3 assists per game. So on the surface, Boykins didn't look like he offered much, yet even though he had played in just 36 games for 3 different teams over the past 2 seasons, his per 36 numbers over that period suggested that he could be an effective player, if given the opportunity. And although he wouldn't get a lot of minutes in the 02 season, he would appear in more games than he had in his first 3 seasons combined. Boykins was still a Clipper in 02 and was able to carve out a modest spot in the rotation, as he would get about 11 minutes per game in 68 games, even starting 2 of them, and would hit double figures in 5 of those games. So his numbers and contributions continued to be limited, but the now 25-year-old Boykins was doing everything he could to stick around in the league. However, the Clippers would manage just a 39-43 record, as Boykins finished the season averaging about 4 points, 1 rebound, and 2 assists per game. He would be waived after the season, and the clock was ticking for him to prove his worth in the NBA, but his perseverance and heart were never a question, and Golden State would eventually sign him, as this would be the year that Earl Boykins carved out a spot in the NBA for years to come. The Warriors featured a high-scoring trio of Antoine Jamison, Gilbert Arenas, and Jason Richardson, and were one of the league's highest scoring teams. But they also didn't have a lot of guard depth, and a scoring guard who could push the pace like Boykins was low risk, high reward, and he would reward them. He would again appear in 68 games, but would get over 19 minutes per game. After never averaging even 15 minutes in any season prior, he would up his numbers across the board and showed his shooting stroke, as he attempted over a 3 per game and made nearly 38% of them. Boykins was showing that even in the NBA, he could be a great scorer like he was in college, if given the opportunity, as he would hit double figures in 23 games this season, including 7 with at least 20. As the shortest active player in the league, was now the top bench player on an NBA team, and would even finish top 10 in 6th Man of the Year voting. But a winning season continued to elude him, as the Warriors would finish the year at 38-44 and miss the playoffs, as Boykins' season had seen him average about 9 points, 1.5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. Boykins was a free agent again, and while he had interest from multiple teams, there was one team that wanted him bad, and that was the Denver Nuggets. They remembered how he went for 20 points and a career-high 7 steals against them last year, and associate coach John McLeod would even compare him to the great Calvin Murphy, due to his scoring ability as a little man. But the Nuggets would finally give Boykins some long-term stability, with a 5-year, $13.7 million deal, and Boykins would prove that he was worth every penny. The Nuggets had a busy offseason. They already featured the big man duo of Marcus Camby and Nene, but on top of signing Boykins to be their 6th man, they had also signed Andre Miller to be their starting point guard, and their big splash was through the 03 draft, and their 3rd overall pick, Carmelo Anthony. For the first time in his career, Boykins would appear in all 82 games, and would play the most minutes of any non-starter. He would hit then career-high scoring numbers, as this was his first season averaging double figures, as he would also be the only non-starter to average at least 10 points. Additionally, his 3.6 assists per game would be second on the team. At this point, it wasn't as much of a surprise when Boykins would have a big scoring output, as he would hit double figures in 45 games, including 3 games with at least 20, and would even record his first career double-double in a December 28th defeat of Golden State, when he had 13 points and a career-high 13 assists, as this season would see him finish 5th in 6th Man of the Year voting. And another pro with Boykins' game was his ability to take care of the ball, as he rarely committed turnovers with his smart and crafty play, and this would all help him get a spot in the skills challenge at All-Star Weekend, but he wouldn't be able to take home the trophy. Yet more importantly, the Nuggets were winning more than they were losing, as Boykins would have the first winning season of his career, after the Nuggets finished at 43-39, which also meant Boykins got his first playoff action versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Boykins would have a great playoff debut, as he would come off the bench in every game, yet would up his scoring and efficiency, as well as his assist numbers. He would go for 16 points and 5 assists on 70% shooting in a Game 1 loss, then put up 12 points in a Game 2 loss. Game 3 would be Denver's lone win of the series, as Boykins finished with 10 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists, but he struggled more near the end of the series, as a Game 4 loss saw him put up 10 points and 4 assists, but only shoot 4 of 12 from the field. Then although he had 19 points in Game 5, he shot just 7 of 19 from the field, as the Nuggets lost the series. But Boykins' first year in Denver had seen him average about 10 points, 1.5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. The 05 Nuggets looked similar, yet had traded for forward Kenyon Martin, but Boykins would reassume his 6th man role, again playing in 82 games, but now getting almost 4 more minutes per game compared to last year, as he would again be the only non-starter to average double figures, with his career-high 4.5 assists per game being second on the team, and Boykins would make history early in the season. In the 6th game of the year versus the defending champion Detroit Pistons, Boykins would come off the bench to score a then career-high 32 points on 11 of 15 shooting, as the Pistons had no answer for the guard, with him also dishing 6 assists in a win. But this was historic, as the 5'5" Boykins became the shortest player in NBA history to score at least 30 points. And then just 8 days later, he would show it wasn't a fluke, as he would have another 32-point outing on 10 of 15 shooting in a win versus Chicago. Overall, Boykins would hit double figures in 57 games and have 12 games with at least 20, including his 2 32-point performances. Additionally, he would record 6 double-doubles on the year, as he made a return to the skills challenge, but would again come up short. And 2005 would see him finish 3rd in 6th Man of the Year voting. The Nuggets would deal with some injuries and a couple coaching changes this season, but after a poor first half of the year, they were one of the league's hottest teams over the second half, overall finishing at 49-33 and getting a first-round matchup with San Antonio. Denver was able to take Game 1, but after 3 games they were down 2-1, and Boykins had been struggling. as he was averaging about 8.5 points on about 28% shooting. But Game 4 would see him explode for a postseason career high of 32 points on 60% shooting, along with 5 assists, yet the Nuggets lost. Then Game 5 would see him finish with 14-5. But the Nuggets lost again and were eliminated, as Boykins' season had ended with him averaging about 12.5 points, 4.5 assists, and a steal per game. Boykins continued with his usual production in 2006, as he would up his scoring for the 5th straight season, even though he was playing almost a minute less per game. He would only shoot 41% from the field, but he would shoot over 34% from deep, on a then career high 3 attempts per game. Boykins would hit double figures in 38 games and would drop 33 points on over 52% shooting, along with 8 assists in a January 10th defeat of Phoenix. However, Boykins would also deal with a major injury, as he would break his hand in mid-March and miss the final 16 games of the regular season. But even after playing just 60 games, Boykins would again finish top 5 in 6th Man of the Year voting, and Denver would still finish at 44-38 and get a first-round matchup with the Clippers. Boykins was back for the series, and after putting up just 6 points in Game 1, he would average about 12.5 points and 4 assists over the rest of the series, hitting double figures in each remaining game, yet only shooting about 33%, as the Nuggets would again be bounced in the first round, with Boykins' season seeing him average about 12.5 points, 4 assists, and a steal per game. Boykins was a Nugget to begin the 07 season, and he was doing his usual work for Denver, but he would really see his scoring take a jump starting in mid-December, as Carmelo Anthony was serving a 15-game suspension for his hit and run versus the New York Knicks. Then just a few days after that, the Nuggets pulled off a blockbuster trade for Allen Iverson. But over the next 11 games after Anthony's suspension, Boykins had one of the best stretches of his career, averaging over 23 points on over 45% shooting. But with Anthony set to come back soon, the Iverson-Anthony duo was definitely going to take priority over Boykins' minutes and shots. So while his stock was highest, the Nuggets shipped away their 6th man. On January 11th, Boykins was the main piece in a trade to the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks' backcourt of Michael Redd and Mo Williams were both dealing with injuries, and were 16-19 at the time of the trade and trying to save their season. So Boykins would be brought in for his scoring, and would even start his first 10 games in Milwaukee, averaging over 18 points and dropping his career high of 36 on 65% shooting in a January 24th loss to the Kings during that 10-game stretch. In total, Boykins would play 35 games for the Bucks and start 19 of them. And overall this season, he would get over 30 minutes per game for the first and only time in his career. And his 14.6 points per game was a career high. But injuries held the Bucks back, as they would finish at 28-54 and miss the playoffs, as Boykins' overall season had seen him average about 14.5 points, 2 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game. Boykins decided not to exercise his 5th-year option after his career year, but that seemed to backfire, as he would be without a team to begin the 08 season, and it wouldn't be until late January that he signed with the Bobcats for the league minimum. But the NBA can be a cruel business, and a now 31-year-old Boykins would never again get anywhere near the playing time he had been getting. The Bobcats were 18-28 at the time of the signing, and Boykins would appear in 36 games for the team off the bench. Yet after averaging at least 10 points in each of the past 4 seasons, he would only average about 5 points this year, as he would have a significant minutes decrease and would only shoot about 35%, and the Bobcats would eventually manage just a 32-50 record and would miss the playoffs, as Boykins' short year had seen him average about 5 points, 1 rebound, and 2.5 assists per game. But Boykins' career would take a detour in 2009. It was announced over the summer that Boykins had signed a deal to play professionally in Italy, which was likely partially due to him wanting to recoup some of the lost wages in deciding to decline his 5th-year player option last season, as Boykins would sign a 1-year, $3.5 million deal to make him the highest-paid player in the Italian league, as he would also receive sponsorship and marketing income from the team. And he was performing well, as by late December, he was their leading scorer at about 16 points per game, while shooting over 45% from deep. But he would head home for a few days during this time to be with his 6th son, even though his leave of absence hadn't been approved. But clearly Boykins had his priorities, and his family came first. Yet team president Claudio Sabatini would refer to this as unacceptable behavior, and imply that he may be released due to this. However, Boykins would remain with the team for the entire season and help them win the Euro Challenge Cup. But then in June, the team would release him, but now he would just make his return to the NBA. Boykins would sign with the Washington Wizards a few weeks into the 2010 season. The Wizards featured their big three of Gilbert Arenas, Antoine Jamison, and Caron Butler, but Jamison and Butler would be traded before season's end, while injuries and suspension would limit Arenas to 32 games. Boykins would appear in 67 games, but was just a rotation piece now, putting up about 6 points in 16 minutes a night. Yet he did make a good first impression, as he put up 20 points off the bench in his Wizards debut, and would still hit double figures in 17 games. But overall, it was a forgettable year in Washington, as they would go 26-56 and miss the playoffs, with Boykins averaging about 6.5 points, 1 rebound, and 2.5 assists per game. Over the offseason, Boykins made a return to Milwaukee, and although he would only get about 15 minutes per game, he would turn in one of his most efficient seasons of his career, as his 44.3% shooting was a career high in any season in which he played more than 30 games, and he would average less than 1 turnover per game. Although he didn't have the same consistent offensive output, he still had an all-around good season, and would hit double figures in 17 of the 57 games he appeared in, as well as have 4 games with at least 20. But Milwaukee was rebuilding, and would go just 35-47 and miss the playoffs, as Boykins averaged about 7 points, 1 rebound, and 2.5 assists per game. Boykins was again searching for a home in 2012, and in late March he would sign on with Houston, where he would appear in 10 of their final 15 games, as they would finish the lockout-shortened season at 34-32, but would miss the playoffs, as Boykins' brief year saw him average about 5 points, 1.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. And that would mark the end of Earl Boykins' career. His time in the NBA wasn't spectacular, but at 5'5", the fact that he made the NBA is spectacular, and stuck around for 13 seasons while being a valuable contributor for over half that time. There's very few players below 6 feet to have an impact in the NBA, and even fewer below 5'8". But Earl Boykins belongs in the same conversation as a Spud Webb or Muggsy Bogues, as true little men who left a mark on the NBA. But unlike those other great yet exceptionally short players, Boykins possessed a long-range shot you had to respect. But if you played him tight, he could have you spinning in circles with his quick change of direction. And in being so low to the ground, it made it very hard to pick his pocket, as he would take care of the ball throughout his career. Objectively, Earl Boykins didn't have an all-time great career, but he was the nation's second leading scorer in college, then became one of the league's best sixth men in the mid-2000s, and overall could score better than a lot of guys over a foot taller than him. So even though on paper Earl Boykins' career seems slightly better than average, if we're talking pound for pound, he's one of the best of all time. But that's it for today's episode on Earl Boykins. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his Denver teammates, or this one on a brief Washington teammate. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.